Talks have been very intense in the past 48 hours between the Palestinian and Israeli delegations when it comes to the ceasefire, with many reports that the ceasefire could be declared in any moment. But there are certain things delaying this ceasefire, and I will be talking about them in this video with you. But before that, threats are coming from Benjamin Netanyahu's main ultra right-wing allies, Smotrich and Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir published a video during which he asked his ally Smotrich, who ran with him, alongside him for the elections previously, to join him and go out of the government if Israel reaches a deal and goes to a ceasefire with Gaza. That's not something that's looking likely to happen in the beginning phase, because the early phase of the ceasefire wouldn't be outright stopping the war. The stopping of the war completely would come at a later stage. But there's a big problem. Both Ben Gvir and Smotrich are losing in the polls in Israel, and if there were any elections, they would hardly get in the Israeli Knesset. Smotrich would not pass the percentage that is required to go into the Israeli Knesset, and Itamar Ben Gvir would hardly pass it. That especially was added after Benjamin Netanyahu's previous ally and member of the Likud party, Gideon Sa'ar, joined the government after he previously resigned from the party. He joined with his new party, giving, of course, the Benjamin Netanyahu government a backing when it comes to agreeing to a ceasefire, alongside the safety net that was given by the opposition to Benjamin Netanyahu to form or go ahead with a ceasefire. Now, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, because they would hardly get anything in any upcoming elections, they know that now is the best time for them to stay, because if they go out and they try and do damage, take the government down, they have no luck in having a partnership with any future government, because they would never get something as good as they're having now with all of the benefits that they're getting from the Benjamin Netanyahu government. So they will be voting against the ceasefire. However, there are indications that they will not be necessarily resigning, handing in their resignations in the early phases. They would probably give it some time. Smotrich said that if it reaches a stage where an ending of the war is declared, I will be resigning, I will get out of the government. However, these two previously voiced concerns about the ceasefire in Lebanon. However, they remained in the government, and they could do the same thing, because at the end of the day, there would never be a government in the current formation as it is now, and Benjamin Netanyahu already gave these people powers that many even in Israel criticize. The latest statement that came from the opposition leader Yair Lapid, calling the Ben Gvir basically a terrorist, saying for how long this terrorist would be in charge of our people's lives. And he also caused outrage in the video that he published by saying that I was able to prevent a ceasefire for the past 5 months, confirming again that he was behind the pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to avoid reaching a ceasefire. And the thing that is shocking Israelis even more is the fact that the ceasefire that we're talking about now is the same ceasefire that was being spoken about in May 2024. Moving on to the details of the ceasefire and what is causing the delay. The main thing that is causing the delay at the moment is Israel not yet submitting the maps of its withdrawal. Israel, in the early phases of the war, before the complete withdrawal in the later phases of the ceasefire and ending the war, they will be in a buffer zone. Israel asked for that buffer zone to be at a width of 2 kilometers. Hamas told them you're getting no more than 500 meters. Some reports claim that both parties settled on having an area of approximately 700 meters. But again, there is no confirmation of that. What's for sure is we're talking about hundreds of meters. However, Israel did not submit them. They agreed to the approximately 700 meters when it comes to Hamas. Some reports said 500, some reports said 700, because Hamas are indeed very tough in the negotiations. Israel said that they will be, or agreed to, submit a map. However, they did not submit a map. Hamas said, we're not going to agree or declare our acceptance of the ceasefire agreement up until Israel hands in the maps. From an Israeli perspective, usually these maps are not handed to like a hostile party. They hand maps to countries that they have dealings with or they have treaties with, not for an organization like Hamas, the arch enemy of Israel, who started Al-Aqsa flood and the attacks on the 7th of October. That's the main thing. There are a couple of other details to do with the mechanisms of releasing the prisoners, which route they will take, but these are not the biggest thing that is delaying it. The biggest thing that's delaying it is the fact that Israel still hasn't handed the maps, and Hamas do not trust Israel with anything, and they need every single bit of confirmation and information that they require from Israel, because they know how Israel plays it when it comes to the negotiations and trying to shrug themselves out or take themselves out of any sort of agreements that they had. That's when it comes to the delay. More details have been leaked about the ceasefire agreement in the Israeli Channel 12. The Israeli Channel 12, they released more details, but these details only spoke about the thick lines, the main general lines when it comes to the ceasefire, not exactly what's going to happen on the two phases. There's a lot of censorship when it comes to the second phase, by the way, and the majority of the information that we're having now is about the first phase. So what did Channel 12 say? Channel 12 said that in the first day of the ceasefire that will take place 1 to 2 days after the declaration of it, 3 Israelis will be released and Israel will start withdrawing from populated areas. When we talk about populated areas, that means, of course, the northern parts, Beit Lahiya, Beit Hanun, Jabalia, areas that Israel is present in, surrounding populated areas like Khan Yunis, for example, and Rafah. From the following week, Hamas will release 4 prisoners of war, and the Palestinians would start being able to go back to the north. The northern part of Gaza. Those who will go back walking to the north will not be checked. Anyone going back in a vehicle will be checked by who? According to reports, Egypt and Qatar. They will be overseeing the vehicles returning to the north and checking them. 1,200 or 1,300 approximately Palestinians will be released in the first phase of the ceasefire. Not a lot is being spoken about the second ceasefire. Massive aid will be going into Gaza. Big amounts of aid will be going in to Gaza in the first several weeks to, of course, make up for the massive shortage that Gaza has been facing following the blockade and the genocide. The Rafah crossing will reopen. So that means we will have a Palestinian side controlling the Rafah crossing, and Egypt will be opening it and dealing with the Palestinian side. Why is it confirmed that the Palestinian side will be there? It's because Egypt said we will never be dealing with an Israeli side on the Palestinian side of the Rafah crossing, because that would, from an Egyptian perspective, set a precedent or have a confirmation or an acceptance that we recognize Israeli presence in the on the other side of the Rafah crossing, something that Egypt does not accept. The return of the Palestinian refugees will be happening, well, those who were displaced from the north will happen initially in the beginning phase through Al-Rashid Street, that's, the Shati Street, that's towards the western part near the sea, and in later stages it will go through the Salah ad-Din route, which is more towards the eastern part of Gaza. On day 16, the negotiations on phase 2 will begin. Now, from an Israeli perspective, there will be a ceasefire. However, these leaks said that during 10 hours a day, Israel will not have any flights over Gaza. So flights could be to do with surveillance or whatever it is, not attacks or fighting. In the day where an exchange is happening between the Palestinian resistance and the Israelis, 12 hours, Israel will be banned from flying over Gaza. In the temporary ceasefire, the hours were less than that. However, of course, Hamas wanted to make sure they have as much gap as possible. And that's all, of course, going to end towards the later phases and with the declaration of the ending of the war, including a complete Israeli withdrawal. And with the second phase, again, we don't have concrete information, but we heard reports that we're talking about massive numbers of Palestinian prisoners, the talks about the rebuilding, and also the talks about the day after in Gaza. One side, though, not very surprisingly, is trying to cause problems. Who's that side? The Palestinian Authority led by the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. What is he doing? Egypt proposed something called a community support committee to overlook and oversee the transition period or the initial phase of the ceasefire and make sure everything is running smoothly. Hamas agreed so long as they have someone they accept leading this committee, not necessarily by them. But the Palestinian Authority didn't want that. They wanted to have a veto and they wanted to be the ones running it. So the Palestinian Authority told Egypt and Hamas and everyone else, no, we don't want to be part of it. So the Palestinian president was hoping to have a scenario, and again, that's not surprising, of 2008 when he was asking the Israeli side to completely eliminate Hamas so he can go back and rule Gaza over the bodies of the Palestinian people. The only difference is now the Palestinian president Abbas is looking to go back to Gaza over a genocide, not just over the bodies of 1,400, 1,500 people, over the bodies of over 50,000 people, over 150,000 total martyrs and wounded and over complete destruction. However, this man is irrelevant and his authority is irrelevant as well. And the ceasefire agreement will go ahead without him because he does not represent the Palestinian people. And he doesn't mean anything really to the Palestinian people. However, he is still living in certain eras that he believes are still existing. And again, it shows how shameful the Palestinian Authority of the West Bank is. During this genocide, they were blaming the Palestinian resistance of causing all of this, covering up Israeli crimes, and even trying to help Israel with certain infiltrations by some of their secret services through the Rafah crossing, pretending to be aid workers, that at the time Hamas took control of that. They arrested them. So that's not really going to work, and it's not going to do anything. To be fair, when it comes to the ceasefire, it's going to go ahead, and that's a de facto confirmation that Hamas will be remaining there. Israel already said there are several options on the table for the day after in Gaza, and one of them is Hamas ruling Gaza. The Israeli government confirmed that. Everyone in Israel knows that. So there's no longer anything to do with defeating the Hamas or eliminating the Hamas or even making sure Gaza doesn't pose a threat again. The only thing that Israel will be achieving if all of this continues with the ceasefire phase 1 and phase 2 is getting back their prisoners of war, but with a much larger number of dead prisoners of war because of Benjamin Netanyahu's stupidity. So this is what's causing the delay so far. Now, Hamas, they don't trust Israel. That's why they're waiting for these maps. Whether Israel submits these maps or not, this is something that we're going to see potentially in the next few hours. That's not something that's considered to be in Israel or even in Gaza a deal breaker. However, Hamas are insisting we need to see those maps and we need to confirm that you will be withdrawing. And again, with regards to, by the way, the Palestinian resistance and the massive victory of the Palestinian people and the massive defeat, the humiliating defeat of Israel, we'll leave that to a later stage once everything is hopefully sorted and we're into the ceasefire. We'll talk about all of the details and the implications and the losses and how that will affect Israel for the coming days, hopefully. Now, it didn't stop with all of these delays and the talks about the ceasefire. Apart from the talks about the ceasefire, Israel is still committing a genocide. They killed over 57 innocent Palestinians since the dawn of Tuesday. That's, again, they kill that amount every single day. Innocent people, nothing else. On the other hand, the Palestinian resistance, alongside the big attacks that they have been conducting against Israel in the past few weeks in North Gaza, with Israel suffering the biggest losses in Jabalia, more than its previous invasions of Jabalia. Now they had an operation in Rafah. What did they do? So Al-Qassam brigades, the armed wing of Hamas, they declared that they had a complex, successful operation in Rafah, in a building where Zionist infantry force of 25 soldiers was stationed, engaging with them with various types of weapons and leaving all members of the force either dead or wounded. As soon as the rescue force arrived, a minefield was detonated under 2 armored personnel carriers. The building remained engulfed in flames for a very prolonged period, and clashes were ongoing for a very long time in Al-Shabura camp in Rafah, southern Gaza Strip. Imagine what, there's the Israeli army, the families of these people, these genocide murderers would be thinking now, with their sons dying for no reason just before a ceasefire, and the fact that the Palestinian resistance is still fighting to the last breath shows you how much persistence they have, how much patience they have, how advanced they are, and how well prepared they were for all of this, despite the fact that they were fighting a country supported by the world's biggest superpower, with a genocide and constant bombardment and destruction of the Gaza Strip. And it wasn't only Al-Qassam brigades. It was none other than Ansarullah in Yemen. Ansarullah in Yemen, they confirmed today that they targeted the genocide state with several cruise missiles. Some of them were on the occupied Haifa area or Tel Aviv, and others were on a power station in the south of Israel near Eilat, according to Ansarullah. And in some of the images that they published the images of their cruise missiles being launched, saying, in support of the Palestinian negotiator. Imagine that. So they're not just supporting the Palestinian people in Gaza and against the genocide and the blockade in the Red Sea and all of that. No, we want to support the Palestinian negotiator up until the deal is signed. So and they also said, we will be continuing the attacks. Again, continuing the attacks. So they're not taking anything. Ansarullah not being relaxed for 1 second, still attacking Israel up until the very last minute. Saying all of this, in Israel, you're talking about vibes. The people are in the streets anticipating very much this ceasefire. Of course, many people in Gaza as well are anxiously waiting for the ceasefire to be declared. The Israeli media, it's as if it's a done deal and they're just waiting for the publication. So everything is prepared for the declaration of the ceasefire. Again, the confirmations that are coming from Israel are talking about several hours, but the latest it could take is up until Thursday. So 24 hours most likely. These are the reports that are coming from Israel. The main thing again is just the map issue when it comes to Israel submitting it to Hamas. Israel said they will give us the maps, but they haven't yet. We need to see them to make sure that they will be withdrawing to the places that we agreed upon. They don't need, do anything else. And of course, that is a sign that they're preparing themselves for the next stage of the negotiations. Because in 16 days after the declaration of the ceasefire, the negotiations over phase 2, which will be potentially even harder, start to take place. However, there is a mechanism, according to certain reports, that even if both sides haven't agreed on phase 2, that the ceasefire will continue up until they agree on it, and all of the details that are related to phase 2, if not even a phase 3, up until the war ends.